The Thomas More Johnson correspondence provides many letters and documents from Thomas Henry Burgoyne, which help to shed light on the development of the Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor in the U.S. By comparison with another set of letters that emerged in 2016 in Western North Carolina, we can now celebrate real progress in solving the mysteries surrounding Burgoyne's later life. This birth register provides the date and place of his birth and the names of his parents. Son of chiropodist Thomas Henry Dalton and his wife, the former Emma Rice, he was born April 14th, 1855, in Douglas, Isle of Man. Zanoni, which Dalton used as a pen name for more than 5 years, was the title character of the 17th of 28 novels by Edward Bulwer Lytton, who was as prolific and popular in his time as Charles Dickens. The popularity of this novel in 19th century America is attested by its title appearing as a place name adopted by rural crossroads communities in Virginia and Missouri. Their now abandoned post offices illustrate the decline of Bulwer Lytton's literary reputation. Emma Harding Britton's memoirs described a group of esoteric researchers she joined in her youth, calling them the Orphic Circle and naming Bulwer Lytton as the leader of the group. Despite being bitter rivals late in life, Madame Blavatsky and Emma Harding Britton had both regarded Bulwer Lytton as an adept during the early New York years of the TS, and continued to do so thereafter. Burgoyne's birth chart, with the date of April 14, 1855, appears in Volume 1 of the Brotherhood of Light books, Laws of Occultism. Author Elbert Benjamin singles out the Light of Egypt as crucial to his own studies, specifying the 1889 first edition. Although Dalton's 3 known mentor figures were remarkably diverse in ethnic and religious backgrounds, they were misidentified with one another, as hopeless confusion reigns in published sources about the identity and pseudonyms of the original Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor leaders, confusion that extended to Burgoyne and all his mentors. Dalton's need for a pseudonym was due to his record of arrest and 6 months prison time for obtaining money under false pretenses. In 1886, he entered the United States as Thomas Henry Burgoyne in the company of Peter Davidson and family as they relocated to the mountains of North Georgia. But within weeks, he moved on to Kansas, Colorado, and then California, living with various members of the Brotherhood, working on what became the Light of Egypt, which was published in 1889. After public accusations from Blavatsky and Judge that she had written The Light of Egypt, Emma Harding Britton denied it indignantly while praising the author and the book. Even though she did not write it, Britton saw the book as vindicating her view of the early TS. Sarah Stanley Grimke is identified in several sources as the author or co-author of parts of The Light of Egypt. And my interest originally in the Johnson correspondence was inspired by the hope that her role in the Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor would be illuminated by the letters. This led first to an examination of Grimke family correspondence in Washington, D.C., and later to a study of Christian Science and Unitarian records in Boston in order to document Sarah's background. Grimke was far better educated than either Burgoyne or Britton, which might be the source of the latter's extolling Zanoni's qualifications. But evidence in letters to the sage makes it clear that most of the Light of Egypt came from manuscripts Burgoyne had written before coming to America. In the summer of 1891, this announcement appeared for a forthcoming book, but Celestial Dynamics was not in fact published until 1896. And it was authored by Zanoni with no reference to the name T.H. Burgoyne. The next year, Zanoni emerges as an astrology teacher in the first publication of Astrophilosophical Publications of Denver. Language of the Stars in 1892 does not mention the name Burgoyne. Also, and importantly, in 1892, Norman Ashley married Teresa Thompson in Boston. This marriage document conflicts in multiple ways with other documents about the two partners. Genevieve Stebbins had married Joseph Thompson in 1888 and was partnered with his sister Mary in her New York business, which attracted such clients as Mrs. Pierpont Morgan and Mrs. John D. Rockefeller. These portraits date from this period. The only evidence of a connection between Burgoyne and Stebbins in the 1880s is his recommending her writings in his private lessons to his pupils, in undated letters quoted in a 1999 edition of The Light of Egypt. This is a Stebbins family genealogy, with 6 changes from the information in the Boston marriage record. The spelling of Astley's name has changed. His father is now John rather than Norman, and he is now a journalist rather than an author. The entry erases the fact that Genevieve had ever been named Thompson, and corrects her mother's name from Louisa to Henrietta. Louisa was Genevieve's favorite aunt who raised her after the death of her mother. Finally, the date has been moved from June 1892 to April 1893. Astley's role as a full collaborator in Stebbins's school is evident in this 1895 press account of the Myth of Isis, which they had copyrighted 2 years earlier jointly, along with the related Myth of Ariadne. Burgoyne was described in 1900 as having died several years earlier and become a source of channeling Volume 2 of The Light of Egypt through Belle Wagner. But a 1930s letter from Church of Light President Benjamin to a boyhood friend in Iowa describes the Ashleys as unable to forgive the Wagners for being usurpers, presumably both of the Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor and of Zanoni's literary career. For 12 years, the Ashleys owned property in the mountains of western North Carolina. This began shortly after their marriage and continued a dozen years until they retired to England. My original research on the Ashleys was conducted at the North Carolina State Archives in Raleigh. There, deeds for land sales explain the couple's tenure in the Western Mountains, but the next step is going to county courthouses in Morganton and Boone, as well as libraries. Those will have more complete real estate records as well as local newspapers of the period. Norman's life managing remote properties in Burke County was far removed from the social life of Blowing Rock with Genevieve. He resided in a rustic cabin rather than the pretty cottage he described as inhabiting with her in the town. Handwriting of Norman Astley has recently emerged from Burke County local historian Helen Norman, whose ancestors owned land formerly owned by the Astleys, where she now resides, and has inherited Astley letters that can be compared with the Burgoyne letters in Missouri. Astley's first emergence in print in the UK is a letter to the British Empire Naturalist Association in December 1908, in which he enthuses about local wildlife, just as he had in his North Carolina letters of the previous decade. At this point, he is living in Devon. He relocated to Jersey, Sussex, and California with Genevieve, before finally returning to Devon after her death with his third wife, Nellie. In 1939, as a widower yet again, in Plymouth, Norman gave his date of birth for the census as April 14, 1855, the same date as in the Dalton Birth Register and the natal chart of Burgoyne. Neil Cantwell is trained in forensic document analysis and concludes on the basis of abundant written evidence that Astley's handwriting is identical to Burgoyne's in many definitive ways, from individual letters to common words like the or and especially signatures. Further light on Astley is provided by The Quest of the Spirit, published in 1913, with Genevieve Stebbins listed as editor and the author A Pilgrim of the Way. I have excerpted the seemingly autobiographical passages from the book and published them as my latest blog entry at adepts.light.org, and also have submitted the same as a paper to academia.edu. And I refer everyone interested in Astley to this book as the sole source of evidence of his later thinking.